Overall, our crime rate is, compared to this quarter to last year, this same time, is relatively flat. We have 4 fewer offenses this year than last year. One of the things we did have a slight uptick in is BMVs, burglary of motor vehicles. One beat is going to be the area north of I-30. We looked at this, and the epicenter for this particular crime spree right here was at the Cracker Barrel parking lot. We deployed our detective who had the case, Officer Investigator Nielsen there. He developed doing canvassing in the neighborhood, these 2 surveillance videos, and Officer Clear stopped the one car on the right, and Officer Vasquez stopped the one car on the left, and we recovered a stolen vehicle and a firearm and arrested a couple of guys, and the burglaries in that area stopped. So they did a great job. This and 2 beat is the area between Highway 80 and Highway 30, Interstate 30 as they split, and so this house is located in that area. Since the first of the year, we've arrested 9 people out of that house for warrants and various other things. And so it's on our T25 list now. We're working with that owner who lets the primary residence is her adult son. So that's on our radar. We're working that. Also, in a 2 beat, we worked another 13 minutes. 4 beat here. We worked another 13-minute patrol area in this 1 beat that experienced a high crime in the 28 days before. They had 15 crimes, and after we did the deployment, there were down to just 8 reported crimes. So it was a 53% decrease in reported crime in that area, in that beat. Also, on the east side of 4 beat, so 4 beat is from the retail area all the way to the city limits of the east. We had an area, burglary motor vehicles. We had 9 of them from January 1 to January 17th. And there's a green belt there. We believe that the bad guy was living in the green belt. Sure enough, we found a homeless encampment there. And after we deployed there with the solid waste and got the area cleaned up, we had no more BMVs in that area. We also had an issue at the Big Town Expo Center with street racers. We did 6 different deployments there. We issued 22 citations, made 6 arrests, and we're engaged in 3 vehicle pursuits. All right. So continuing with that, to try to prevent that from happening again, we've obtained a criminal trespass affidavit from the Expo Shopping Center management and the Quick Trip there, and we're going to recommend that they fence off the area when they're not using it. And we're going to continue aggressive patrol out there with on-duty units. We had a rash of business burglaries beginning back in December. We had a similar suspect. He was wearing actually the same sweater on each of these 6 different crimes. We caught him March 16th. And one of the interesting things about him is, if you look at the bottom right of that, is his criminal history. He's been arrested 14 times for burglarizing a building. He should be in prison, and yet he's still out walking around. And he confessed to those other 5, so he confessed to all 6 burglaries. He's also, that UPF means an unlawful possession of a firearm by a felon, resisting arrest, evading arrest, stealing a car, tampering with a governmental record, and unlawful carrying a weapon. So he's not a nice guy, and he's at least in jail right now, so we'll see how long he stays there. Also, this tobacco store, based on those deployments there, we identified the tobacco stores as potential burglaries for cigarette burglars, and Officer Abel's one of our Deep Nights guys. He was watching this business, saw 2 guys enter and come out with trash bags full of cigarettes. He caught them, recovered all the property. And the big highlight of the case is that we had 6 churches broken into during this last quarter and 2 MISD facilities. And when we caught the guy, he lived in Garland. He was coming down here and working. Our CID did a great job. And we charged with 8 counts of burglary of building and vehicle theft. And we got almost all the property back to its rightful owners. So a couple of things he sold online before we could recover them. Robberies last year. The first quarter of last year and the first quarter of this year were down significantly in number of robberies, particularly in the business robberies. And part of that is last year we had 3 different crews. We had the Whataburger crew working the first quarter of the year. We had a couple of guys hitting our convenience stores and gas stations. We've arrested those guys, and so this year we're seeing the fruits of that, not having as many robberies. We did have a capital murder arrest this year. We've had 4 murders. Our last one was on March 24th. A 2-year-old child was being babysat by her mother's boyfriend. He became frustrated with her because of her lack of potty training and her interrupting his video game. So he beat her to death. And we ended up seeing her at the hospital unresponsive, and the autopsy revealed she had massive internal injuries. And Detective Barrett here, I want to just highlight this. Investigator Barrett did a great job because the guy had a great story that matched the injuries, but after Detective Barrett spent some time with him, was able to get him to tell the truth, and he confessed. Without that confession, we would not have been able to get justice for this young lady had he not got him to admit to what he did. Our K-9 unit has been very successful, doing a lot of training, a lot of demonstrations and deployments. They recovered 11 pounds of heroin. That picture on the right, this is the dog who captured that, and you can see how it was packaged there on a traffic stop. Also, overall, this is what they've been doing from January to March. They've had 158 deployments, and 87 of those narcotic detections. And so you can see what they've been able to do. 20 people have been found and arrested and without narcotics, and 37 people arrested for narcotics offenses. So they're doing a great job. 77 pounds of heroin. They've been doing a great job out there and finding those things where we would not be able to find them. In fact, one of those cases, we had arrested the person, done a search warrant on their house. We did not locate the narcotics, and we got information later on, so they were still narcotics there. Took the dog back, and he found it. It was concealed in the wall of the house, and he found it. Great job. Also, our deployment unit, the group of officers we have working, you can see some of their activities right there. They've found a lot of methamphetamine, heroin, marijuana, THC wax, guns. They've been doing a great job out there. Narcotic seizures, this is important. You can see for the first quarter of last year, they seized $4,500. In the first quarter of this year, they've seized almost $700,000 worth of cash.
Wow, that's great.
Some of our arrests, the last year, 2018 are in the yellow, and the 2019 are in the gray. You can see what a tremendous job they've been doing. But unfortunately, we've been having a lot of those things like. All right. All right, marijuana and THC arrests are on the rise. We've arrested 68 kids in our high school this school year for either THC, marijuana. THC is the tetrahydrocannabinol. It's the active ingredient in marijuana that makes it a psychoactive drug. And so the most popular form of THC in the states that have been that has been legalized is in the oil, the vape pen. So they put them in a pen. It doesn't smell like marijuana. It's almost undetectable. You have to catch them with it and see the effects of it on them. And edibles. The challenge with those two is that they're extremely, extremely potent. Typical marijuana that people are used to smoking that comes from down south, from Mexico and other countries, is 3 to 5% THC concentration. The marijuana coming from California and Colorado is 30%. And if you get THC vape pen, you're getting 95% THC. So you get a very potent effect. And so also with those, what we're going to see is we're going to start seeing is emergency room visits in El Paso County in Colorado, where Colorado Springs, and my friend's the police chief there. Their ER visits went from 500 a week to over 3,000 a week. Their emergency rooms were overwhelmed by kids eating edibles because they looked like candy or candy bars or cookies, and they're eating them, and they would get poison, get toxic marijuana reactions to that. And so THC, and one of the things I want to make sure the parents can know, we're going to try to put something together. This all coming from the states where it's legalized. All this stuff is being imported here. We're getting more marijuana from California and Colorado than we are from Mexico. The cartels are no longer running the business here. These are people in this area who are importing it from those other places. And so the packaging, even in those states that it's legalized, require them to say it has THC. So a parent may not know that THC means marijuana. So we need to let them know that, and they need to be checking what their kids are eating and taking to school, because we're recovering these edibles and these things in the schools. NIBIN is our ballistics thing. We have 100. You see that correlation. The correlations means we've been in the system and they relate to another crime. The leads where there was a direct identification with a gun used in another crime. So we only had 6 of those this quarter, but we had a whole lot of correlations. The correlations are like fingerprints. They have to be verified to tie to a specific individual. Our forensic computer lab, we updated the equipment with some of our seizure money. A lot of the evidence we recover now for child pornography from people's cell phones, from people's computers, has to be downloaded. And the old equipment we had took up to 24 hours for each device. We have these 2 top-notch computers, so we can do what took us 24 hours before, we can do in about 4 hours now. We're the only one of 3 agencies in North Texas to have this technology, so we get a lot of requests from other agencies to help them with their digital evidence. Forgery. This lady was stealing a mail up in the Club Estates area. Back in January, we caught her. We arrested her. She had over 50 pieces of identifying information. She bonded out of jail, and in March, we caught her again doing the same thing. And This time they held her in jail, but she has a long criminal history of stealing and doing forgery stuff, opening credit cards in other people's name, credit card abuse, and things like that. So I encourage folks to be watching their mailboxes and getting their mail out in a timely manner. Skimmers, we got 5 more skimmers in January. This is a picture of one of the guys who's on the skimmer in Irving at a gas station. We believe he's the one who put it here. We haven't identified him. He hasn't been arrested. I would advise anyone never, ever, ever use your pay at the pump. Go inside and pay, because you never know what those one of those skimmers are there. And once you find out, it's too late. You've already been victimized. We have a new detective doing our sex offender registrations, and he's been doing a really good job. He's filed 5 cases already in 2019. He's made 3 arrests of those cases. He's registered 106 people. We have a total of 159 registered sex offenders in the city, and he knows where each one of them lives, and he tracks them on a daily and weekly basis. Our communications center, we're still doing a really good job. The big metric is there in less than 10 seconds. So we answer 99.67% of our calls within 10 seconds. That's the national standard. The national standard is 90% within 10 seconds, and we answer 99.67%. So our alarms, our false alarm rate is reduced to 87%. That's a very good number. And we don't have the March revenue numbers, so those numbers aren't completely accurate there. Top false alarms people, businesses there, each one of those have been visited personally by one of our alarm person to make sure that they're repairing their alarm and doing things they need. You can see in the jail activity, we've arrested 1,700 people versus 1,682 in the fourth quarter of last year. So arrests are up, and that's the presentation. So, any questions?
Very good, Chief. No, we're doing a great job as always. And one thing about our PD, if you do something bad in Mesquite, chances are you're going to get caught. And we appreciate all the efforts that you and your department make, and the men and women in your command, and keeping our streets safe and working as hard as you do. I know we talk about back in the blue, and we do, but sometimes it's something that we don't say enough times, and that's just the appreciation for the men and women that are out there every day doing what they're supposed to be doing. We thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else?
Just to echo that, Mayor, and I appreciate those words, and thank you so much for what the MPD is doing. And on my part, I have personal friends, pastors of different churches with that church bandit. So glad you got that one, and I know that they're relieved as well. But I appreciate the department and how they reached out to the churches immediately, got out there. Thank you for all you do and for the report of these criminals that will be caught. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Archer.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo the praises for the great work you and your team are doing. A couple of questions. We've fortunately had a number of classes graduate in the last several months. How is the retention going so far with new recruits who are in field training? I know we occasionally will lose some, which I'm sure every department that has, but how's that going? And the ones who do stick around, how's that going their first 6 months to a year, just overall?
Well, since January 1st of 2018, we've had 19 people leave the organization. 2 of those failed the academy, 2 of those quit in the academy, and 4 of those quit in field training. So 8 of that 19 were in the training process when they left the organization. 2 retired, 1 went to work for a vendor, and 7 have resigned before I was going to fire them because they engaged in misconduct. So those are vacancies that I will gladly take to keep the integrity of this organization very, very high.
Is there a general pattern of the ones who are leaving during training or right after training? Is it just a mix of different reasons, or?
Well, of those 8, 5 of them were female recruits that we hired that either failed or quit. And so that's something we're looking at our training team. Is there something we can do to encourage them, to retain them? Is there something we're doing in the training process that makes it more difficult for them? Those are all questions we're still trying to work through. I don't know the answer to that question, though.
Sure. And this next question may be for perhaps you and the fire chief, but whenever we do have a new recruit that for whatever reason doesn't complete their training, is there a method in which they are required to pay those funds back for their training, or how does that normally work?
If a recruit makes it through our training and gets certified and licensed by the state, passes the state exam, if they leave our service and enter into service with another agency, based on that license that they obtained through us, they have to pay us back $3,500. They sign an agreement in the beginning. So far, We haven't had anyone in the 3 years I've been here do that. I mean, though they've left the profession altogether. They haven't been hired by somebody else.
So only if they enter into a contract with another organization, they're required to.
Well, if they
stay
go and
back.
get hired within 2 years,
2 years.
because your licensing is good for 2 years if you don't get your 40 hours of training. And so if they make it past that, then we just had one leave last week, and she was here 3 years. She quit right after I got here in field training. She worked in the jail force for 3 years, so she completed her time, and then she went to another agency, closer to where she's from. So.
The city manager and I spoke Saturday night about concerns about the AMC Theater, which I know happens once or twice a year. Usually a number of young people that get a little bit out of hand. Not all young people that go there, but some. My wife and I witnessed a number that were just out in traffic on Gross Road, and unfortunately, a number of your officers were having to be pulled there instead of other places that could be useful at. I have a number of constituents who voiced concerns about ineffective security at AMC. Do you have any thoughts on that? A number of years ago, our officers worked that security, and I think it went a whole lot smoother, and I know they made some changes probably for monetary purposes, but just want to get your thoughts on that, and if you feel like that you and your team can get in there and make some changes with what they're doing over there to make things a little bit better.
Yes, sir. There's several parts of that. First of all, we're having a meeting set up with the management of the theater tomorrow, and we're going to meet directly with them. We'll also have a deployment plan of what we're going to do. I want to reach out to some of the other thing is that the young people, we arrested 5 people that night and cited several others, and everybody that we cited or arrested was not from Mesquite. They're from Dallas, from Red Oak, and from Cedar Hill, who were brought up here and dropped off by their parents to just hang out, and we encountered them. So we're going to try to get the word out that we're not going to tolerate this, and if you come here, you need to behave yourself or you're going to be consequences. We're going to do strict enforcement of the curfew ordinance to make sure that if they're out past those other hours, then we're going to cite them or take them into custody and call their parents. So we have some mechanisms. I would prefer to gain voluntary compliance than to go in there heavy-handed. These are young folks, and they do sometimes not make the best decisions. I know when I was a teenager, I didn't always make the best decisions. But we do have a plan to follow up, and I understand the seriousness of what happened Saturday night, and we don't want to repeat of that.
Are you getting good cooperation from AMC?
Well, they agreed to meet with us. We'll see once we have the meeting with them face-to-face and see what they offer. They did have Mesquite Police work in there. They went to just other outside officers, and now they've hired a private security company. And they're not police officers. They're commissioned security officers. And so the feedback I received from my officers, but they weren't engaging or assisting. Our officers were doing all the work. So that's something we're going to address with the management. We have a way to address this. I prefer that we get their cooperation and we do it as a partnership and not as us coming in there and dropping the hammer on folks.
Good. Last question, Chief, and I know it's always difficult and complicated with the gunfire issues that we have all throughout town, and sometimes, as we know, not in our town, to the west of us in Dallas. How are the discussions with your team of recent going with that? Any progress? And again, I know it's not easy because oftentimes a resident may call y'all, and by the time you get there, it's stopped. And so, what are your thoughts right now? Where are we at with that?
Overall, the shots fired calls are down this year compared to last year. And that could be, for several reasons. Maybe the gunshot has been reduced. Maybe people just quit calling. I don't know the answer to that one. But I know that we'll follow up diligently on each one of those. Every time we get a call, whether the person is there or not, our officers patrol the area to determine if anyone was injured, if any property was damaged, or if there's any evidence, like the shell cases they can collect, and we enter them into evidence and so enter into NIBIN so we can link those guns. One of those correlations we had was for a gun that was used here on 3 different occasions to fire into the air, random gunfire, that the shell casings left were traced to a gun that was used in a robbery homicide in Dallas. So that's kind of what we look at with the intelligence on these guns. Not to say that person, but that gun was used. So we know that based on the information we found through NIBINs. But we take each one of those serious, sir. We do follow up on them. I do believe we're doing better overall than we have been in the past few years.
Good to hear, and I appreciate the work that you and your team have done incorporating technology into solving crimes, and I appreciate the day-to-day sacrifices that your team makes every day. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. All right, Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate the update.